The man at the gate had walked from the crossroads by the look of the dust on him, and he had not eaten today by the look of everything else. Eliza Croft stood in the yard with a hay fork still in her hand and did not lower it.
We're not hiring.
Everyone in Marstead has told me that today. You're the fourth.
Then perhaps you should try a fifth farm, or a sixth.
I would if there were one left before dark, and if I had any faith the sixth farmer would like the look of me better than you do.
He said it without complaint, as though reporting weather he had no power to change. His coat was good wool once, cut close at the shoulder, gone soft and gray at the cuffs from wear rather than poverty. His hands, when he set down the small case he carried, did not have the calluses of a man who had ever mended a fence in his life. Eliza noticed that. She noticed most things about strangers now. It had become a habit she did not enjoy owning.
What can you actually do?
I can learn what needs doing faster than most men can explain it.
That's not an answer.
It's the only honest one I've got left today.
The eastern paddock fence had been down since Tuesday, and the gelding had gotten into the wheat twice for it. Eliza Croft was 4 months into running her father's farm alone with a debt note coming due at Michaelmas, and no coin to spare for a man who could not tell her plainly what he was good for. She looked at him a moment longer. Rain was coming, she could smell it on the wind off the moor, and there was a fence to mend before it did.
Fence first. You eat if the fence stands by supper. We'll discuss wages after that, if there's anything left to discuss.
Fair enough.
He picked the case back up before she could offer to carry it, which she had not intended to do, and followed her toward the paddock without another word, and that was the whole of it. That was how Gabriel Fell came to Croft Farm, with no references, no calluses, and a name that was only half of one. He mended the fence by supper. He mended it well, in a manner that suggested he had watched other men do it more than he had done it himself, which was true, though Eliza had no way of knowing that yet. She paid him in bread, cheese, and a corner of the hayloft to sleep in, because that was what she had, and he took it without comment, the sort of silence a man keeps when he's decided not to examine a kindness too closely. Her father had died in March, of a chest that never cleared after a wet harvest the autumn before, and left her a farm, 40 acres of decent grazing, and 6 horses worth more than the land. A note at the county bank would come due with the Michaelmas rents, whether she was ready for it or not. 2 men had already offered to solve that problem for her. Mr. Aldous wanted the water meadow and did not particularly care whether Eliza came attached to it. Mr. Pruitt wanted a housekeeper who would not argue about the accounts and had said so, more or less, in those words. She had refused them both within a week of each other, and the village had decided collectively that Eliza Croft was too proud for a woman with a debt note and no father to speak for her. She had decided privately that she would rather lose the farm honestly than keep it by marrying a man who wanted the deed more than he wanted her signature on it. Her father had taught her the breeding lines himself, back when a daughter learning such things was considered eccentric rather than useful, walking her through the paddocks before dawn and explaining bloodlines the way other fathers explain scripture. He had never once told her a horse's pedigree mattered more than its temperament, and she had never once forgotten it, not in the horses, and though she would not have admitted it aloud that first week, not in the men who came asking after her either. What he had not taught her, because he had not lived long enough to need to, was how to read a bank's patience, or how many favors a note could survive being called in before a neighbor's goodwill turned into a neighbor's leverage. That particular education Eliza was managing to acquire entirely on her own, one uncomfortable Thursday at a time.
Is the sky like this often? This far north?
You've been here one day.
One very gray day.
Wait for the winter. You'll wish for gray.
That was the whole of their second conversation, and it should have told her nothing at all. It told her, instead, that he had a way of looking at weather like a man deciding whether he could still be surprised by anything, and she found she did not entirely dislike the sound of his voice when he was not asking her for work. His coat came off in the rain the day he mended the fence, soaked through, and Eliza hung it by the kitchen fire to dry while he finished in the yard. It was mending it needed, not just drying, a seam gone at the lining, and she sat with a needle to it before supper without thinking much of the task at all. The lining was heavier on one side than plain wool had any business being. She worked 2 fingers into the gap and found, stitched into the lining itself, careful and deliberate, not lost there by accident, a man's signet ring, heavy gold worked with a crest she did not recognize and had no way to place. A hired hand did not own a ring like that. A hired hand did not sew a ring like that into a coat so it could never be found by accident, only by someone who went looking, or someone mending a seam who had no reason to expect anything at all. She sewed the lining back exactly as it had been, and said nothing of it that evening or any evening after. But she watched him differently from that night on the particular attention a person pays to a locked door once they've glimpsed the shape of a key through the crack beneath it. Gabriel Fell learned the farm the way a man learns a language he is ashamed to admit he does not already speak. He asked old Tam, who had worked the Croft land since Eliza's grandfather's time, how to tell a cast horse from a colicking one, and Tam told him, and told the loft afterward that the new hand asked good questions for someone who ought to have known the answers by now. He learned to muck a stall in under 10 minutes. He learned which gate stuck in wet weather and which one only looked like it did. He learned Eliza took her coffee black and her arguments the same way and offered neither sugar unless you'd earned it. 3 weeks in, the young mare Thistle went down twisting with colic in the night, and it was Gabriel who heard her first, and Gabriel who kept her walking in slow circles under the lantern until the worst of it passed. Eliza came out in her night clothes and a shawl to find him talking low and steady to a half-panicked horse, as though he had done this 100 times before, though he had not once.
Where did you learn to do that?
I watched a groom do it once, on an estate I used to visit. I remembered more of it than I expected to.
It was not a lie, exactly. It was the sort of true thing a man says when the whole truth would cost him more than he is ready to spend. Eliza noted it much as she noted most things he said filed away, unremarked upon. A small stone added to a pile she was not yet sure she was building. Market day in Marstead came every second Tuesday, and Eliza had gone every second Tuesday of her life, first at her father's side and now, for the first time, at the side of a hired man who carried her egg baskets without being asked to. It was Mrs. Yarrow, at the linen stall, who said it loud enough to be heard, which was, everyone understood, rather the point of saying anything to Mrs. Yarrow at all. A woman alone with a strange man sleeping under her own roof. Whatever her father would have said, I'm sure I don't like to think. Eliza did not turn around at first. She had learned in 4 months of running a farm alone that turning around only fed a thing that starved perfectly well on its own. Gabriel turned around for her.
I sleep in the hayloft, madam, above the horses who are considerably better chaperones than most people credit them for. Miss Croft pays me a fair wage for fair work, same as any farm in this county pays any hand, and I've yet to hear a word said against Mr. Aldous for the 2 men he keeps on at his place.
Mrs. Yarrow had not expected the hired man to answer for himself, still less to answer well, and the small crowd that had gathered near the linen stall, as crowds do near any promising unpleasantness, found itself instead mildly entertained at her expense.
He's quite right, Mrs. Yarrow, though I'll admit the horses have never once gossiped about me, which is more than I can say for the linen stall.
There was laughter at that, real laughter, and Mrs. Yarrow's opinion of the matter went back into her basket along with her unsold thread, and the 2 of them walked on toward the tool merchant with baskets a little lighter in a silence between them that had changed its character somewhat since the gate.
You didn't need me to answer that for you.
No, I didn't. I let you anyway. I'd like you to notice that, since I don't intend to make a habit of it.
He said nothing to that, but he was smiling when he picked the baskets back up, and Eliza found she did not entirely mind having been noticing it. If you're finding your way into this evening's story and you'd like to stay a while longer, a like helps more people find their way here too, and it costs you nothing. And since we're speaking of weather, is it clear where you're listening from right now? Or clouded over? Or somewhere in between? Tell me in the comments. I do like knowing what sky you're under while I talk. Mr. Silas Cornwell called on a Thursday in a good coat and a better carriage to discuss, as he put it, neighborly concerns.
Your father's note comes due at Michaelmas, Miss Croft. I happen to know the bank has grown less patient than it was in his day.
I'm aware of my own accounts, Mr. Cornwell.
Of course you are. I only mention it because I've taken the liberty of purchasing the note myself. It seemed unkind to let a stranger hold it over you when a neighbor could hold it instead.
He said it as though he were offering her a kindness rather than a leash, and perhaps in his own accounting he believed he was.
I'd be glad to forget the debt entirely, Miss Croft, on a rather more permanent arrangement between our two families.
I'll have the sum by Michaelmas, Mr. Cornwell. Every shilling of it, and no arrangement attached.
You've 6 horses and a hired man who looks like he's never held a plow in his life. I do hope your confidence is better founded than it appears.
His gaze went past her, to the paddock, where Gabriel was working a green colt on a long line. Something crossed Silas Cornwell's face that was not quite recognition yet, only the itch of it. The sense of a name half remembered from a room he had once stood in the corner of, wanting badly to belong. He said nothing more of it that day. He only watched a moment longer than courtesy required, and then took his leave with a bow that was 1 degree too formal to be entirely friendly. Eliza did not tell Gabriel what Cornwell had said about the note. She told herself this was because it was her burden to carry, not a hired man's business. She did not examine too closely why that reason felt thinner than it should have. August wore on, and the farm settled into a rhythm that Eliza had not felt in a house since her father's cough first turned wet and worrying. Gabriel worked from first light. He asked for nothing beyond what she already gave him. He read. She noticed one evening passing the barn an old book of her father's, forgotten on a shelf, and read it like a man returning to something he had missed, not one discovering it fresh. She asked him about it the next morning, lightly, meaning nothing by it.
I know it's a lot,
You read Latin.
but I believe we can make it work.
Badly. Slowly.
We can.
Most of what I remember. I remember from being made to sit still for it as a boy.
Most stable hands weren't made to sit still for Latin.
No, I don't suppose they were.
He did not offer more, and she did not press, though the stone pile in her mind had grown heavy enough now that she had started, without quite admitting it to herself, to count the stones. The rain that caught them both out by the north hedge a week later gave neither of them any warning at all. One moment the sky over the moor was only gray, and the next it had opened entirely, and the tack room was the nearest roof for a quarter mile. It was not a large room. A single window, shuttered against weather, a wall of harness leather and old saddles, and barely enough floor between them for 2 people to stand without their sleeves touching. They stood without their sleeves touching for perhaps 4 minutes, and then the wind drove the rain sideways through the gap under the door, and there was rather less floor than there had been. Eliza was intensely aware of the warmth coming off him, of the particular quiet of 2 people listening to weather instead of each other because it was safer than the alternative.
This is a very small room.
It is.
You could stand by the window.
I could.
He did not move toward the window. Neither, she noted afterward, with some private irritation at herself, did she suggest it a second time. The thunder came close enough to shake the harness on its pegs, and Eliza startled, and Gabriel's hand came up to steady her elbow before either of them had decided it should, and stayed there a moment longer than the thunder required.
Eliza,
He said her given name the way a man tests ice. He is not yet certain will hold him.
Don't.
I wasn't going to say anything unwise.
You were about to. I could hear it starting.
He laughed, low, surprised into it, and the sound of it did something to the small room that the thunder had not managed. Neither of them said anything else of consequence before the rain thinned enough to walk back across the yard, and neither of them mentioned afterward How long they had stood there once the worst of the storm had already passed, and there had been no real reason left to stay. 3 nights after, Gabriel came to find her on the porch step after supper, and stood there long enough that Eliza set down her mending and waited.
There's something I ought to tell you. I should have told you the first week, and I've been finding reasons not to ever since, and I don't think the reasons are good ones anymore.
Eliza felt something in her chest go very still, the particular stillness of a person bracing for a blow they cannot yet name.
Tell me then.
He opened his mouth to do exactly that, and old Tam came round the corner of the barn at a half-run, calling that the roan gelding had gotten its leg tangled in wire down by the lower fence and was tearing itself worse with every second it fought the thing. Gabriel was gone toward the barn before Eliza had fully risen from the step, and by the time the gelding was freed and calmed and the wound salved, it was near midnight. The particular courage a man needs to say a hard, true thing had gone out of the evening, the way heat goes out of a stone once the sun's well down.
I'll tell you another time, soon.
You said that as though you're promising it to yourself more than to me.
Perhaps I am.
She let it go that night, because the gelding's leg had needed 12 stitches, and everyone was tired down to the bone, and because some part of her, if she was honest, was in no hurry to hear a thing that had cost him this much to almost say. She would think of that porch step often afterward, not with anger, exactly, with the particular regret of having stood one step away from the truth and let a torn fence pull them both back from it. The harvest fair at Michaelmas was the whole of Croft Farm's hope that year. 6 horses ready to show, 3 of them Eliza's own careful breeding, and if they sold as well as they ought to, the note would be paid in full, and Mr. Cornwell would have nothing left to hold over her at all. 2 nights before the fair, Silas Cornwell found Gabriel alone at the well, and did not announce himself as he had at Eliza's door. He simply stood at the mouth of the lane, blocking the only easy way back to the house, and waited until Gabriel noticed him there. There was no good coat on him tonight, no unhurried talk. He looked for the first time since Gabriel had come to Croft Farm, like a man who had stopped performing courtesy because he no longer felt he needed the audience.
I placed you, finally. Lady Dunmore's charity ball, 2 winters back. You were introduced to me for perhaps 90 seconds, my lord, and I confess I am rather better at faces than most men give me credit for.
Gabriel set the bucket down very carefully, as though his hands had suddenly become something he no longer trusted.
You're mistaken.
I am not, and we both know it. Gabriel Ashwick, Earl of Rendlesham since your father's passing, unless the papers have lied to me, which they rarely do about titles.
Silas smiled, slow and satisfied, like a man who had finally found the door he'd been looking for, and the key besides.
I'll make this simple. You'll be gone from this farm by the fair, quietly, with whatever story suits your pride, or I'll make certain every soul in Marstead knows exactly what's been sleeping in Eliza Croft's hayloft. I doubt her reputation survives it kindly, my lord, whatever your intentions.
My intentions have never been the sort that need hiding.
Then it should cost you nothing to leave and prove it.
Gabriel did not answer that. He picked the bucket back up and walked past Silas Cornwell without another word, though his jaw had gone tight in a way it had not been tight since a drawing room in London months before. A woman he had once agreed to marry had asked him, quite reasonably, whether the title came with the wedding trip to Italy or only the house in town. What Gabriel did not hear, because he had already turned back toward the stables, was Silas Cornwell speaking a second time, low, to the man who had driven his carriage out and was waiting by the gate with the patient stillness of someone used to being given errands rather than reasons.
If the Earl hasn't the sense to leave quietly by the fair, then those horses had better not be fit to show. A farm that fails to pay its note is a farm I don't need to ask for twice.
The driver did not ask what he meant by fit. Men who worked for Silas Cornwell had learned, over the years, that the question cost more than the answer was worth. He had come north for exactly one reason: to be wanted, once by someone who did not yet know there was anything to want beyond the man standing in front of her. He had not expected the wanting to cost quite this much to protect. The storm came up faster than either of them watched for. The night before the fair, black cloud rolling off the moor with no more warning than a held breath before thunder. It was not thunder that woke Eliza. It was the sound of the paddock rail giving way, and Juniper screaming. She was down the stairs and into the yard in her nightclothes before she had fully decided to be. And what she found in the lightning-lit dark was a man's shape at the broken fence line.
Steady now. Easy.
Gabriel was already running past her toward the road, where the young gelding had bolted through the gap, wild-eyed, straight for the turnpike and whatever wagon might be coming along it blind in the rain. The man at the fence was not Tam, and was not anyone Eliza recognized, and he had a knife still in his hand from cutting the top rail clean through, and when she shouted he ran for the tree line rather than answer for it. She had no time to chase him. She had a horse loose on a road in the dark, and a hired hand who had gone after her with nothing but his own 2 hands and no earthly business surviving it. Gabriel caught Juniper's halter rope on the second pass, at the very edge of the turnpike, and the gelding's panic threw him hard against the stone wall before he settled. Gabriel held on anyway, one arm wrenched and his temple opened above the eye, and did not let go until the horse had stopped trembling. Eliza found them both there, horse and man, shaking in the rain.
You could have been killed.
She could have been killed on that road faster than I could.
That isn't an answer either.
No, I don't suppose it is.
She walked him back to the house herself, her shoulder under his good arm, and cleaned the cut above his eye at her father's old kitchen table by lamplight, her hands steadier than her voice had any right to be.
Someone cut that rail on purpose. I saw the man. I didn't know him.
Think I do.
And because he had nearly lost her the fastest, cleanest way a man can lose something, not by leaving, but by letting a lie stand 1 hour longer than honesty could bear, Gabriel told her.
My name is Gabriel Ashwick. I hold the earldom of Rendlesham. Since my father died this spring, I came north because I was tired to the bone of being wanted for a title I never asked to inherit, and I wanted just once to find out if anyone would still want me without it. Cornwell recognized me 2 nights ago. He's threatened to use it against you if I don't leave before the fair. I should have told you the first week. I told myself every week after that it wasn't yet the right one.
Eliza set down the cloth she had been using on his temple. Her hands had gone perfectly steady, which frightened her rather more than shaking would have.
You let me pay an earl in bread and a corner of my hayloft.
You let me earn it. That was worth more to me than anything I owned in London.
Don't make this generous. You lied to me for 3 months in my own house, while I stood in front of you and told you things I hadn't told anyone since my father died, and the whole time you were deciding, every single day, not to say the one true thing that mattered.
He had no honest answer to that, because she was right, and he knew it, and a title does not excuse a silence, however well the silence had once been intended.
You're right. I have no defense that doesn't sound like an excuse.
Then don't offer one. Sleep in the barn tonight. I need the walls between us for a while, my lord, if that's still what I meant to call you.
He went, without argument, and Eliza sat alone at her father's table until the lamp burned low, turning over a debt she had not asked for and a truth she had not wanted, in a night that had already cost the both of them more than either had planned to spend. She thought about the 2 men who had offered to marry the farm out from under her, both of them honest about wanting the deed more than the woman attached to it. She had refused them for the plain, undecorated truth of what they wanted, and she had thought that was the worst a man could do to her, want the thing without the person. Gabriel had wanted the person so badly he had buried the thing entirely. That was not the same lie. It was not even a cousin of it. It only wore the same coat. She thought of Juniper, wild-eyed on the turnpike, and a man who had never once, in 3 months, asked her for anything he had not first earned with his own hands, title or no title standing behind them. She did not decide that night to forgive him. She only decided somewhere near the bottom of the lamp oil that a lie kept to protect his own comfort would have ended things between them for good. A lie kept out of fear of losing the one honest thing he'd found in years was a different animal entirely and deserved, at the very least, to be looked at in daylight before she buried it. Word travels faster in Marstead than weather does, and by the time the Michaelmas Fair opened its gates the next morning, Silas Cornwell had heard, from the same hired man who had fled the paddock with a knife in his hand, that his warning had come too late. The Earl had told her himself. This did not stop Silas from trying. A man who has built his whole plan around a secret rarely notices when the secret has already stopped being won. He found his moment at the center of the auction ring, in front of half the parish, as Eliza led Thistle in for showing.
Good people of Marstead, before this sale goes further, you ought to know precisely who's been living under Miss Croft's roof these 3 months. This is no farmhand. This is Gabriel Ashwick, Earl of Rendlesham, sleeping in her hayloft and eating at her table under a false name, and I leave it to you to judge what sort of arrangement that suggests.
He said it loudly, and he said it well, and he had clearly practiced the shape of the silence he expected to follow it. He did not get that silence. Eliza got there first.
I've known for a day, Mr. Cornwell, which is a day longer than you seem to think, and I'll thank you not to tell my neighbors my business as though you'd discovered it for my benefit rather than your own.
A ripple of something that was not quite scandal went through the crowd, closer to surprise that the scandal had arrived already spent. Like a firework, someone had lit a full minute too late. Gabriel stepped into the ring beside her, still in his working coat, mud on his boots from the morning's chores, the cut above his eye only half healed.
Everything he said is true. My name is Gabriel Ashwick. I came here under a false one, and that was a wrong I'll be answering for with Miss Croft for some time yet, I expect, and rightly so. But I'll say this plainly, in front of all of you. I came to muck stalls and mend fences, and I did that honestly. Every day, whatever name I did it under. I'm not leaving that work today because a neighbor of hers found it convenient to announce my title in an auction ring.
He took the lead rope from Eliza's hand, not to take over, but to walk the colt forward for the buyers himself, exactly as a hired man would, exactly as he had done every showing day that summer. The crowd's whispering shifted, slowly from scandal towards something closer to respect, the particular Yorkshire respect reserved for a man who does not stop working just because he's been caught out. Silas Cornwell had built his entire attack on the assumption that the truth would humiliate her. He had not accounted for the truth arriving a day stale, or for an earl who preferred mud on his boots to an apology delivered from a safe distance. The bidding, when it finally began, ran higher than Eliza had dared to hope. Thistle's foal alone cleared enough to answer half the note, and by the time the last horse left the ring, Croft Farm owed Silas Cornwell nothing at all. A fact Eliza made a point of telling him herself, in the same tone he had once used to discuss neighborly concerns. She was not finished with him yet.
Before you go, Mr. Cornwell, the constable will want a word about the man who cut my paddock rail last night, and the horse he nearly put under a wagon wheel on the turnpike. I understand he drives your carriage.
Silas Cornwell's easy composure cost him something to hold, for the first time all day.
I know nothing of any such thing.
He does? I heard you instruct him myself at the well, though I confess I didn't understand the errand until a horse nearly died proving it to me.
There was no 90-second charity ball's worth of doubt in the crowd this time. A man who would maim horses and endanger a public road to force a woman's hand was a different sort of scandal than an earl who mucked stalls under a false name, and Marstead, whatever its opinion of Eliza Croft's pride, had never much cared for men who hurt animals to win an argument. Silas Cornwell left the fairground before the last horse had even sold, and did not stay in Marlstad long enough to see whether the constable came calling, though he did within the week, and the driver besides. Croft Farm heard nothing more from that direction ever again. Gabriel found her by the empty paddock as the fair emptied out around them, evening coming down soft and gold over the moor.
I meant what I said in the ring about the work. It wasn't performance, Eliza. It was the only 3 months I've had in years where I wasn't being wanted for the wrong reason.
You still lied to me.
I did. I can't undo that. I can only tell you that from tonight forward, you'll never again have to wonder if I'm telling you the whole of a thing.
She looked at him a long moment, the way she had looked at him that first day at the gate, weighing him, though what she weighed now was not whether he could mend a fence.
If you ever lie to me again, my lord or not, I'll put you back on that road myself.
I deserve every step of it.
And because a whole county had already watched them both be far more foolish than either cared to admit, Eliza closed the last of the distance herself, and kissed him there by the broken paddock rail he had mended twice now, once with his hands and once, harder, with the truth. The note was paid before winter. The fence held through it too. Gabriel kept a house in London he visited 3 times a year and resented every one of them. He kept the earldom because a man cannot simply set down a title as easily as he once set down a false name, however much he might wish to. His solicitor learned that first autumn that letters addressed to Croft Farm were answered within the day, and letters addressed to anywhere else in England could wait a fortnight without apparent cost to anyone's conscience. Mrs. Yarrow, for her part, found a great deal to say about an earl mending fences in her own village, and said all of it now in tones of the deepest personal pride, as though she had championed the match from the very first Tuesday. Eliza kept the farm, and kept her own name on the deed, and made it entirely clear, to Gabriel and to the county both, that Croft Farm would remain Croft Farm regardless of whose ring she eventually agreed to wear. Whether she agreed to wear one at all was a question she intended to answer in her own year, and no one else's. He also kept, by his own insistence, and rather to the amusement of his London solicitor, a standing arrangement with Croft Farm. A portion of his wages for mucking stalls each summer would continue to be paid in bread, cheese, and a corner of the hayloft whether or not he had any further need of the loft at all. Eliza never did let him forget it was owed. She brought the bread out to the paddock herself most mornings, and stood a while watching him work before either of them said a word, and found, each time, that the silence had gotten easier to stand inside of than it had ever been that first gray day at the gate. I knew someone, once, who spent so many years being wanted for what he had that he nearly forgot anyone could want him for what he did. I want to say his name was Aldrich. No, Ambrose. Ambrose, that was it. I only met him the once, so you'll forgive an old memory for losing the finer edges of it. What I haven't forgotten is what he told me, years after, sitting by a fire much like this one. He said the truest thing anyone ever gave him wasn't a title or a fortune. It was a woman handing him a hay fork and telling him to prove himself before supper. I wonder if you've ever had someone want the real, unpolished shape of you, before they knew there was anything grander attached to it. I'd like to hear about it, if you have. Some stories are worth telling in the comments, even the quiet.